If you're scared of spiders, never ever visit Mars. In March 2025, NASA's Perseverance rover found something looking like a bunch of tiny spider eggs on the surface of the red planet. This something is made up of hundreds of little round balls stuck together. What if all these eggs hatch? Will hordes of 8-legged creatures swarm the red planet? Doubtful. The thing found by Perseverance was just sitting there on a hill called Witch Hazel, near the edge of Jezero Crater. On closer inspection, it turned out to be a weirdly shaped rock with a bit of Martian dust on it. Yeah, sadly, or luckily, those weren't Martian spider eggs. Even so, the formation really stood out from everything else around it. The Perseverance team named the weird rock St. Paul's Bay. It's what scientists call a float rock. This term means that it didn't form where it was found, but somehow got moved there. So, at the moment, we don't have enough clues to figure out its background and how it got that strange texture. But that's not the only mystery. Something had to move this rock from its original spot. One theory claims that the rock could have been created when a meteorite smashed into Mars. The powerful impact must have blasted rocks into the air, and those bits could have cooled down and formed the tiny balls we see now. If that's true, this rock might have come from really far away, and it could give us new info on how big impacts move stuff around on the red planet. NASA thinks the rock might have just rolled down Witch Hazel Hill. It could have come from one of the darker layers up on the hill. We have seen those layers from space. Now, the goal is to study Witch Hazel Hill more closely and find out if those layers are made of the same stuff as the St. Paul's Bay rock. If so, it might mean a few things. Maybe there was volcanic activity in that region, or a big meteor hit, or there might have been groundwater there in the past. If this theory turns out to be true, there's a chance that some of those rocks might hold tiny fossils from ancient microbes. That's why NASA is planning to bring some of the rocks back to Earth in the 2030s with the Mars Sample Return mission. We'll get to study them up close and maybe, just maybe, find signs of ancient Martian life. Now, the funniest thing about it all is that it isn't the first time scientists have dealt with arachnids on Mars. Spiders on Mars is actually the nickname for a weird-looking surface feature. In certain places on Mars, you can see big dark cracks that spread out like spider legs. Some are huge, over 3,000 feet wide. From above, they seriously look like a bunch of creepy crawlers moving across the planet. These spooky shapes were first spotted by Mars orbiters in 2003, and they've been showing up in satellite photos ever since. At first, no one had a clue what they were, but now, scientists think they form when carbon dioxide ice, dry ice, sitting on the surface, suddenly turns straight into gas. That fast change causes gas to shoot through the ice and carve out all those strange crackly patterns. An even cooler thing is that NASA scientists have been able to recreate those Mars spiders in the lab here on Earth. They built a special setup mimicking Mars's surface and watched tiny versions of the spiders form right in front of their eyes. The team had been trying to recreate those Mars spiders for 5 years. When it finally happened, they were overjoyed. Back in 2021, scientists managed to explain how those spider-like marks form on Mars using something called the Kiefer model. The basic idea is that in spring, sunlight shines through big, clear chunks of frozen carbon dioxide, aka dry ice. That heats the Martian ground underneath, and the ice starts turning straight into gas. The gas builds up under the ice, and when the pressure gets too intense, boom, the ice cracks. Gas shoots out, dragging dark sand and dust with it, leaving behind those spooky spider patterns once the ice melts in summer. The team tested this theory using a big special chamber nicknamed Dusty. Yeah, that's a real name. It's about the size of a barrel, and can recreate the freezing cold, super low pressure conditions on Mars. We're talking about -301 degrees Fahrenheit. The researchers also put fake Martian soil in the chamber and covered it with CO2 ice. Then they used a lamp underneath the soil to heat it up, just like the sun heats up Mars. Their experiments worked, and little spider shapes formed just like they do on the red planet. The study also revealed something new. The team found that ice formed inside the ground too, and it caused the soil to crack along with the ice. This might explain why the spider's legs are so zigzagged instead of straight, like we might expect. Next, they want to keep doing experiments to figure out more about the Martian spiders, like why they only show up in some places on Mars and why they aren't getting more common over time. The red planet is apparently set on playing tricks on people from Earth. For example, in April 2023, NASA's Curiosity rover took a little break from searching for signs of ancient water on Mars and stumbled upon something curious: a travel book. Later, scientists realized that it wasn't really a book, just a rock. But it does look like a little hardcover with a page frozen mid-turn. This book rock is tiny, measuring only about 1 inch wide. So it might not hold any ancient Martian stories, but at least it's travel size. Then in January 2023, the University of Arizona shared another bizarre image: a rock formation that looked like the face of a giant teddy bear. It had two distinct beady eyes, a button nose, and an upturned mouth. It was captured by NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which was orbiting the red planet at the time. Scientists from the University of Arizona explained that the teddy bear face was likely just a natural formation, like a broken up hill or mound in the center of an ancient crater. Another cool find occurred in February 2022. The Curiosity rover spotted something that could only be described as a tiny flower made of minerals. It looks like little coral branches, but it's actually a mineral deposit, which is pretty rare to see in a flower-like shape. Most of these kinds of deposits are formed when ancient water mixes with rocks on the Martian surface, so they're not exactly new to scientists. But this one is unique, since it looks like a tiny plant or flower. Now, the next discovery is even wilder. Once, the Curiosity rover snapped a pic of what looked like a perfect doorway in a Martian cliff. Naturally, people started wondering if it was some kind of secret entrance, or maybe a hidden base for astronauts. But in reality, it's just a really cool rock formation. Winds and erosion carved away at the rock over time, creating a perfect symmetrical shape. Going even deeper into the past, back in 2018, a researcher noticed weird stick-like shapes in an image and thought they looked like fossilized animal footprints. Unfortunately, NASA quickly shot down the idea. Those tracks turned out to be salt deposits that formed in areas where water evaporated. You can find something similar on Earth too, for example, in dry lake beds. So, while it's pretty interesting that there's more proof that Mars used to have rivers and lakes, these tracks aren't evidence of life, just a quirky rock formation. Now, the next find is absolutely amazing. NASA's Opportunity rover found round, blueberry-like rocks on Mars back in 2004. But those aren't the kind you eat with your cereal. The blueberries you're looking at are made of iron, and they're evidence that Mars used to have a lot of water. Over billions of years, water smoothed them out and created these little balls. Scientists think that they formed when Mars was much wetter than it is now. The iron-rich blueberries are a pretty big deal because they show that Mars could have been a very different place a long time ago.
Something is happening on the red planet! Scientists believed that they knew nearly everything about its atmosphere, but a NASA rover has discovered something unexpected. There's more oxygen on Mars than they thought, and it behaves in weird ways. In the spring and summer, oxygen levels go up even more, and no one knows why. Now, you might think that when there's oxygen in an atmosphere, it's mostly because there's life somewhere around, like trees on Earth that produce oxygen through photosynthesis. But on Mars, it's not that simple. Non-living processes can also create oxygen, so we can't surely say that its presence means there's life on Mars. Mars has long been one of the main candidates when it comes to looking for signs of extraterrestrial life. Back in the 90s, scientists announced they had spotted potential proof there could be life on Mars because of microbes they had found in a meteorite that had arrived from the red planet. It looked like they had found fossils of bacteria. They actually stumbled upon tiny crystals of magnetite in the meteorite, which they believed could only have been produced by living organisms. It was such a mind-boggling discovery. People were excited, but many were also skeptical. It didn't prove there really was life on the red planet. Maybe there was life there a long time ago. The meteorite is thought to have originally formed on Mars billions of years ago, and to have landed on Earth thousands of years ago. Skeptics soon started to pick apart the evidence and eventually found some things that didn't make sense. For example, these magnetite crystals. No one could be sure how they formed. Why do they have to be bacteria? Some research has shown they could be the result of shock waves. Recently, the Perseverance rover has collected a couple of new rock samples from the Jezero Crater on Mars. The theory says that about 3 billion years ago, before the red planet lost most of its atmosphere and basically just dried out, there was a big lake with a river flowing from it in that area. Whoa, what a great environment for life! Perseverance studied mud samples it had found on the bottom of the evaporated saltwater lake. Scientists were amazed to see a record number of sulfate molecules, something we usually find in mollusk shells on our home planet. Such organisms evolved a couple of 100 million years ago, but maybe there was a time when some of their space ancestors lived in water bodies on Mars. Mars has weaker gravity than Earth, which means these weird species could have got really big there, way bigger than their Earth cousins. Gravity plays a significant role when it comes to limiting the size of organisms. Bigger organisms need more energy to move against gravitational forces, but the creatures that may have lived there long ago are just a mix of hypothesis and our imagination, something that's still really hard to prove. Meet the Curiosity rover, another robot NASA is using to explore Mars. Curiosity has been in charge of measuring the composition of the atmosphere of the red planet for many years now. The rover has discovered that it mostly consists of carbon dioxide and a little bit of nitrogen and argon. The atmosphere of Mars has only 0.1% of oxygen, since, as far as we know at the moment, Mars doesn't have plants that could produce enough oxygen. But Curiosity has also discovered anomalies no one can really explain. It's found out that there are spikes in oxygen levels in the Gale crater during the Martian spring and summer. Every year, oxygen levels go up and down in unpredictable patterns there. What's even more interesting is that the oxygen spike is similar to a seasonal spike in methane, which is a gas we often associate with life on Earth. No wonder scientists are scratching their heads and wondering if there's a connection between the two gases, and if they both come from the same source on the Martian surface. Is there something big that breathes there? Come on, we'll be happy even with some small space worms in the soil. There's a type of salt called perchlorates in the Martian soil. Some scientists believe perchlorates might be responsible for the strange spikes in oxygen levels. But like with most things we know about space, it's just a theory. Also, scientists think that perchlorates breaking down in the Martian soil release oxygen too slowly to cause and explain the sudden increase in oxygen levels. One of the suspects is hydrogen peroxide, which is like water's unstable cousin. Hydrogen peroxide forms when sunlight breaks up carbon dioxide and water vapor in the Martian atmosphere. It can seep into the soil and stick to particles underground, which means it forms some kind of oxygen storage tank. Some data even show there are pockets of subsurface water in the Martian soil that may be hiding enough dissolved oxygen to actually support life. But even if the hydrogen peroxide could stay in the soil for millions of years, it would still only explain a small part of the increase in the level of oxygen. So you can't blame it for the whole thing. We can also take a look at an old experiment from the 1970s, where scientists found that moistening the Martian soil caused it to release a lot of oxygen. However, they did this experiment at a warmer temperature than the planet's average. And again, it doesn't explain how the oxygen spike keeps happening every year. None of the clues we have seems to fit the case. Mars may not have enough of its own oxygen, but it's possible to make this gas there. NASA conducted a small experiment where they tried and managed to produce oxygen on Mars. Moxy is a device that can make oxygen on Mars. It managed to produce enough oxygen for an astronaut to breathe for 100 minutes. This awesome device worked in pretty tough conditions, at night or during the day, at extreme temperatures, and during the crazy dust storms the red planet is known for. Despite all this, Moxy still kept up with producing high-purity oxygen. Moxy is a clever device that can make oxygen on Mars by taking in carbon dioxide from the planet's atmosphere and heating it up to incredibly high temperatures. This allows the device to pull oxygen atoms from the carbon dioxide and produce breathable oxygen gas. If we want to use Moxy to make enough oxygen for human missions to Mars, we need to make a bigger version of the device. But if we make it bigger, we might have trouble keeping it at the right temperature and making sure it heats up evenly without breaking. The ultimate goal would be to create an oxygen device that could continuously support a human mission for about 400 days. With a bigger version of Moxy, we'd have enough oxygen to support crew members and even propel a return rocket to our home planet. When you see the dusty red surface of Mars, you can't say it's a place that hides liquid water underneath. Some say it's too cold for water to exist on Mars anyway. But there are stories that there could be a hidden world of liquid water, just like subglacial lakes in Antarctica. And to find out more, we might have to drill down about a mile beneath the surface. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen anytime soon. But in the meantime, scientists have been using a spacecraft called Mars Express to study radar reflections around the southern pole of Mars. The reflections seem to indicate there could be liquid water, and the planet's interior might be keeping it warm. But some claim it might just be rock. We hope there are underground lakes on Mars because it would be a perfect spot to look for life. After all, scientists have found bacteria living in subglacial lakes on Earth. But we don't know for sure how deep they are, or if they're just small veins of water in the ice. Only time and more exploration will tell.
New research suggests that Mars might have all the necessary conditions for the appearance of life. Does it mean aliens could be already waiting for us on the red planet? Let's figure it out. On Mars, there are just the right conditions for photosynthesis beneath dusty ice layers in its mid-latitudes. And photosynthesis, the process used by plants, algae, and cyanobacteria to turn light into chemical energy, requires water and sunlight. On Mars, a thick layer of ice might filter out harmful solar radiation while letting enough light through to enable photosynthesis, creating what researchers call radiative habitable zones. This doesn't mean that, at the moment, life exists or has ever existed on Mars. At the same time, the findings give scientists clues about where to search for potential signs of life. Both Earth and Mars lie within the Sun's habitable zone, where temperatures can support liquid water. But while our planet's surface is covered with huge oceans, Mars appears dry and desolate. Yet evidence from NASA missions like Curiosity and Perseverance suggests it wasn't always this way. Ancient lakebeds and river channels show that water flowed on Mars billions of years ago. Today, water exists on Mars primarily as ice, often in surprising locations. Scientists believe Mars lost its liquid water when its magnetic field faded, which led to its atmosphere getting stripped away by solar winds. With little atmosphere left to trap heat, water vapor escaped into space, leaving the surface cold and dry. Without an ozone layer, Mars also faces intense ultraviolet radiation, which destroys the complex molecules essential for life. Mars gets about 30% more harmful UV radiation than Earth. But dusty ice layers could shield potential habitats from this radiation while still letting in enough sunlight for photosynthesis. Using computer simulations, researchers found that dust within Martian ice could cause it to melt from below, forming thin layers of liquid water. These pockets could be shielded from evaporation by the overlying ice, creating the two essential ingredients for photosynthesis: water and sunlight. Past studies also suggest that even small amounts of dust, less than 1%, in dense Martian snow, can enable melting in mid-latitudes. Observations of exposed dusty ice near Martian gullies also support the idea that these conditions could form shallow liquid water layers under the surface. At the same time, the amount of dust in the ice plays a critical role. Ice with too much dust blocks sunlight, while ice with just the right amount, from 0.01 to 0.1%, can create habitable zones at depths of 2 to 15 inches. Cleaner ice could allow these zones to form deeper, between 7 and 10 feet. As for Mars's polar regions, even though they're rich in ice, they are likely too cold for this melting to occur, making mid-latitudes a more promising target. Interestingly, similar habitats exist on Earth, providing an analog for what might happen on Mars. On Earth, cryoconite holes form when dust and sediment heat ice surfaces, melting them enough to create pockets of liquid water beneath. These translucent ice layers allow sunlight to go through, and researchers have discovered microorganisms living in these shallow subsurface environments. While they go dormant in winter, when sunlight returns in the summer, it reactivates these tiny ecosystems. While this research doesn't confirm the existence of life on Mars per se, it does open up new avenues for exploration. Understanding how dusty ice interacts with sunlight and melts could help identify potential habitable zones on the red planet. The research team is planning to refine their simulations to better pinpoint where and when melting might occur on Mars. They're also recreating these conditions in the lab to study them in greater detail. This work could provide important insights for future missions looking for signs of life on Mars. Mars has long been a source of mystery and fascination, with numerous anomalies discovered on its surface that challenge conventional explanations. Among the most intriguing is a square-shaped formation captured by the Mars Global Surveyor's orbiter camera. This unusual structure, visible in an image available through Arizona State University's Mars Image Explorer, has sparked intense debate among researchers and enthusiasts alike. Many believe that this geometric formation, along with other peculiar structures on Mars, warrants further investigation as it could potentially reveal artificial or unknown processes shaping the Martian landscape. The discovery of this square-shaped formation has raised profound questions about its origin. Unlike the chaotic natural formations typically seen on Mars, this structure exhibits a level of symmetry and geometric precision rarely found in nature. Most natural geological processes, such as erosion and volcanic activity, tend to create irregular, unpredictable formations. However, the almost perfect angles and well-defined edges of this Martian square suggest that it may not be the product of ordinary geological forces. Some skeptics argue that its unique shape indicates an artificial or intelligently designed origin, pointing to the possibility that Mars may have once harbored an advanced civilization or been visited by extraterrestrial beings in the distant past. If this theory holds, the square formation could represent the remnants of an ancient structure, now partially buried under Martian dust and sediment. One of the most compelling aspects of this formation is its location and scale. The image from the Mars Global Surveyor provides detailed measurements suggesting that the square formation is significantly large, far beyond the scale of ordinary rock formations. Its distinct shape compared to the surrounding terrain makes it stand out as an anomaly, further adding to the mystery of its existence. If it were merely the result of natural geological processes, one would expect to see other similarly shaped formations nearby. Yet this is not the case. This discrepancy raises questions about whether Mars has undergone processes unknown to mainstream science, or if intelligent intervention played a role in shaping its surface. Supporters of the artificial structure hypothesis argue that the square formation could be a remnant of an ancient Martian civilization, similar to the ruins of ancient cities found on Earth. They suggest that if Mars once had conditions capable of supporting life, it is entirely plausible that an advanced society could have flourished there before some catastrophic event led to its demise. Given the evidence of past water activity and the possibility of an ancient atmosphere, this theory is not as far-fetched as it might seem. If Mars did indeed host intelligent life in the distant past, structures like the square formation could be key to understanding the history of the planet and the fate of its inhabitants. Another possibility is that the square formation may be linked to extraterrestrial visitors. Some researchers speculate that Mars may have been used as a base or an outpost by non-human intelligences at some point in history. The precision of the square shape and its distinct edges lend credibility to the idea that it may have been deliberately constructed rather than formed through random geological processes. If true, this would suggest that Mars has played a far more significant role in interstellar history than previously thought. NASA and other space agencies have largely remained silent on the implications of these formations, often dismissing them as natural rock formations or imaging artifacts. However, this stance has not deterred independent researchers and analysts from continuing to investigate. With the increasing availability of high-resolution images from Mars rovers and orbiters, more anomalies are being identified, adding to the growing body of evidence suggesting Mars may not be the barren, lifeless world it is often portrayed to be. The presence of geometric formations on Mars raises profound questions about our understanding of planetary science and history. If the square formation is indeed artificial, it could revolutionize our understanding of Mars and the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence. Despite skepticism from mainstream scientific circles, the demand for further study of these formations continues to grow. Many argue that future missions to Mars should prioritize the exploration of these anomalies using advanced technology to determine whether they are truly artificial in nature. With human missions to Mars on the horizon, the opportunity to investigate these structures up close may soon become a reality. If we are to uncover the true nature of Mars, we must be open to the possibility that what we find there could change everything we thought we knew about the universe. The square-shaped formation on Mars remains one of the most intriguing and unexplained discoveries in planetary exploration. Its geometric precision and distinct appearance challenge traditional explanations and fuel speculation about its possible artificial origins. Whether it is evidence of an ancient civilization, a remnant of extraterrestrial visitors, or a geological anomaly unlike any seen before, this formation demands further study. As humanity continues to explore the cosmos, we may one day uncover the truth about Mars and the mysterious structures that lie on its surface, revealing secrets that have been hidden for millennia.
We've been dreaming about life on Mars for a long time. Not only about growing potatoes there in the future, but also about all the potatoes that could have been there in the past. Has there ever been life on Mars? Recently, scientists have found something that could be evidence of that. Let's find out what happened. Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun. A human hasn't set foot on Mars yet, but robots have set their wheels. The first spacecraft that visited the Red Planet were NASA Viking landers. They flew there back in 1976 and sent us a lot of interesting data. Back then, we didn't know anything about Mars. To us, it looked like a cold, lifeless desert. But since we're so similar, scientists began to wonder, has it always been like this? Or is it possible that once Mars used to be thriving and full of life? And in 2022, NASA's Mars rover Perseverance found something that could shed a light on this mystery. But first of all, what is Perseverance? Scientists have suggested that if there was life on Mars once, it's unlikely that it could simply disappear without a trace. It must have left some traces, perhaps underground, where they would be protected from radioactive solar tantrums and other nastiness. So we need to check the rocks. It's important to note that we aren't looking for life on Mars right now. There most likely isn't any. Instead, we want to look into the distant past of our twin planet. We're talking billions of years ago, when Mars could have been warm, green, and far from lifeless. In other words, we have to find dead microbes and various chemical compounds similar to ones on the Earth. This is the mission of our main character, Perseverance. It arrived on Mars in February of 2021. The spacecraft landed on the bottom of the 30-mile-wide Jezero Crater, and after landing, it scooted over to the west, to the place that prompted scientists to choose Jezero for research. This place is a dried-up river delta, and this former river is already more than 3.5 billion years old. The Jezero Crater itself was once a large lake. Yup, apparently there was life on Mars, and scientists have suggested that these places would be perfect as bodyguards of microbes. That's exactly what bacteria do on Earth. They hide, being still in the depths of lakes and ponds, so we could probably find traces there. The researchers believe that this particular lake has the highest scientific value in the entire mission. The highest chance to find rocks on which such bacteria could survive is here in Jezero. So Perseverance went to the delta. The row wasn't easy though. The rover missed a little and landed further than planned. As one famous movie said, "This little maneuver's going to cost us 51 years." Fortunately, Perseverance took only 1 year, and on the way, it was able to explore Jezero a little. The rover uses a complex built-in tool to explore the world. The tool is called Scanning Habitable Environments with Raman and Luminescence for Organics and Chemicals, or just Sherlock. Boy, NASA sure loves its acronyms. As the device approached the delta, the signal of organic molecules became stronger. Soon, these signals were everywhere, and besides, they were the brightest that the scientists have ever seen. What does it mean? Elementary, my dear Watson. You know, Sherlock. It's time to dig. Since July 2021, Perseverance has drilled and collected 4 thin cores of sedimentary rock. The total number of collected rocks at the moment is 12. This is the first time in history that we're collecting something like this on another planet. These 4 cores were found on 2 rocks called Skinner Ridge and Wildcat Ridge. The first pair of cores, the ones from the Skinner Ridge, don't seem very interesting at first glance. They're quite close to what we can find in many places on Earth. However, if we look at them closer, we'll see that they're dotted with round grains of some dark material. These dark grains could have once been deposited on them by an ancient river, the same one that flowed into Jezero. It's possible that the river brought them from places hundreds of miles away from Jezero, and that's pretty cool. If we study these cores, we'll be able to learn even more about the far corners of Mars. Well, there are no corners on it, but you get the idea. Then, in April 2022, Perseverance did arrive at the delta, and then scientists finally found what they were looking for. The discovery, to put it mildly, excited them. They found 2 more cores, which held organic substances. This pair was taken from the Wildcat Ridge. It's found very close to the Skinner Ridge, but the 2 rocks are quite different from each other. These samples are lighter in color and more uniform. Most likely, they're mudstone, an unusual rock similar to clay, but harder and unable to absorb water. They're also finer grain than the cores of the Skinner Ridge. Why does it matter? Because the finer the grains in the stone, the more likely it is that there may be some traces of a past life in it. On Earth, fine-grained stones most often lie on the bottoms of ponds and in similar places. There, they can preserve the remains of dead organisms and similar stuff for years. And this is exactly what we found on them. Additionally, according to scientists, there was more organic matter in these 2 cores than in any other place studied by Perseverance so far. It probably accumulated there while the lake was gradually evaporating billions of years ago. So, there really was life on Mars? Well, let's slow down a little. Organic substances are molecules holding carbon. And yes, on Earth, they're most often associated with life, but not always. Sometimes they can form as a result of other things. Therefore, we cannot say for sure whether there was life on Mars. We don't know if these molecules really remain from some Martian microbes, or if they're the result of some other things. But the discovery is still very significant. We have to literally keep digging this way. To learn more about this organic matter, scientists need to collect a couple more samples of fine-grained rock. It would also be great to study the material lying around these former reservoirs. Perseverance has already moved to another area, to a place with a beautiful name, Enchanted Lake. Now it needs to look for similar things there. It will also continue to study Lake Jezero. Eventually, Perseverance will climb to the top of the delta and then continue exploring ancient sites outside the crater. Sometime before the end of 2022, Perseverance will probably have 6 or more samples of the Martian cores. Unfortunately, its tools, though complex, are quite limited. This data alone won't be enough for us to get a complete picture. Therefore, NASA plans to send other spacecraft to Jezero in the coming years. Together with the European Space Agency, they're working on the next robotic mission, known as the Mars Sample Return. The name speaks for itself. These devices will arrive and take away all the test tubes from the old Prospector Perseverance. After that, these samples will be delivered to Earth, though not by Amazon Prime, and then scientists will be able to analyze them in advanced laboratories. However, all this will take a really long time. The launch of this mission is scheduled for 2027-2028, and the spacecrafts won't be able to return until 2033. But if everything goes well, it will be the first samples in history delivered to Earth from Mars. In other words, there's still enough space for research, literally. And yes, we don't yet know the true meaning of these finds. But that's why the entire mission was created, right? And who knows? Maybe in a few years we'll finally find out the truth about what happened on Mars billions of years ago. Ooh, check out the Martian! Made you look. To look. The red parched earth under your feet is shaking. Large cracks are opening in the ground, threatening to swallow you. But unlike on Earth, these quakes aren't coming from within the planet. A threat coming from space is triggering them. Scientists have made a shocking discovery about Marsquakes. By using AI and NASA's InSight data, they found out that some of those tremors are caused by meteorite impacts. It means that Mars gets hit 2.5 times more often than we thought, and new craters are forming all the time. But the scariest part is that these impacts don't just shake the ground. They send powerful shock waves deep into the planet, revealing a hidden seismic highway and an unstable interior, unlike anything we imagined. This changes everything we thought we knew about Mars. So now, the big question is, what else is lurking beneath the surface? But let's follow scientists' train of thought first. They took Marsquake data from NASA's InSight lander and compared it with fresh impact craters spotted by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. That's when they discovered that some impacts create a seismic highway through the mantle instead of being absorbed by the crust. Even though NASA shut down InSight in 2022, its data is still precious. The lander, which placed a seismometer on Mars, recorded over 1,300 Marsquakes, some caused by underground rock cracking under heat and pressure, others, apparently, by meteoroids slamming into the surface of the red planet. By studying how seismic waves move through the crust, mantle, and core, scientists keep piecing together Mars's deep structure. In the past, researchers already linked impact craters with seismic data. But these new studies are the first time when a fresh impact has been connected to quakes detected in Cerberus Fossae. That's a highly active region 1,000 miles away from InSight. Scientists have discovered this 71-foot-wide crater much farther from NASA's InSight lander than expected, if we consider the strength of the seismic waves it produced. Mars's crust was thought to absorb most of the energy from impacts, which would limit how far seismic waves could travel. But the analysis of this crater revealed that, instead of getting dampened, the waves took a more direct and deeper path through the planet's mantle. This unexpected finding suggests that Mars has a seismic highway, which allows quakes to spread much farther than previously believed. Now, the InSight team will need to reassess their models of Mars' internal composition and structure. And then, we might better understand how impact-generated seismic signals can reach such depths. Manually sorting through the vast amount of data would have taken years. But luckily, these days, there are new tools, and scientists can go from tens of thousands of images to just a few in a matter of days. So, researchers focused on finding craters within approximately 1,800 miles of InSight's location. Their aim was to identify those that formed while the lander's seismometer was active. By comparing before and after images from the context camera over time, they identified 123 fresh craters to cross-reference with InSight's seismic data. Out of those, 49 craters were potential matches for quakes detected by InSight's seismometer. And after conducting some more analysis, the team decided that the 71-foot Cerberus fossae impact crater was the main finding. This discovery is likely to help scientists differentiate between signals from internal quakes and those caused by meteoroid impacts. Initially, they believed that Cerberus fossae produced a lot of high-frequency seismic signals linked to quakes originating inside Mars. But the new data suggests that some of this activity may have been caused by impacts, not internal processes. Another mystery scientists haven't been able to crack for 50 years is why Mars is split into two very different halves. But thanks to recordings of Marsquakes, they may have finally found the answer. Since the 1970s, researchers have known that Mars has two distinct regions. The northern lowlands cover about two-thirds of the planet's northern hemisphere, and the southern highlands make up the rest. The southern highlands sit about 3 miles higher than the northern lowlands, and the crust, the planet's outer layer, like a shell, is thicker in the south. This strange divide is known as the Martian dichotomy. There are two potential explanations for this imbalance. One theory suggests that an unknown internal process within Mars created the difference. The other claims that a massive collision, probably with a moon-sized space rock or several smaller impacts, once reshaped the planet's surface. But Mars' surface is extremely old. That's why pinpointing exactly what happened has been difficult. But now, a new study, published on December 27, 2024, has used Marsquake data from NASA's InSight lander to figure out whether the cause of this difference lies deep inside the planet. InSight was positioned near the boundary between the northern lowlands and southern highlands. Its mission included recording seismic data from Marsquakes, which travel through the planet's mantle, the rock layer beneath the crust. So scientists compared how these waves moved under both lowlands and highlands. They looked for differences in the planet's deep interior. It turns out that the seismic waves lost energy much faster when traveling through the southern highlands. It means that the mantle beneath this region is significantly hotter than in the north. It's compelling evidence that internal planetary forces, rather than an external impact, caused Mars' unusual split. The research team believes that the temperature difference between Mars' two halves can be traced back to ancient tectonic activity. It once shaped the planet, but later stopped. At some point in the past, Mars had moving tectonic plates, like Earth's. As these plates shifted, they, along with the molten rock beneath them, could have created the Martian dichotomy. But eventually, the movement stopped, leaving behind what scientists call a stagnant lid. That's a thick, immobile layer over the planet's molten interior. If this turns out to be true, it might mean that the mantle beneath the southern highlands is still pushing upward, while the mantle under the northern lowlands is sinking deeper toward the planet's core. This ongoing process could explain why Mars' crust is thicker in the south. At the same time, we can't completely rule out the idea that an external impact created the dichotomy. Some recent studies suggest that a giant collision could still be a possible explanation. To solve this mystery for good, scientists will need more Marsquake data and detailed models of how Mars originally formed. By the way, if you ever decide to visit Mars, you might come across the hero of our video today, the InSight lander itself. It was supposed to launch in March 2016, but a problem with one of its instruments caused a delay. It was a vacuum leak in the seismometer. NASA rescheduled the launch for May 2018, and the issue was fixed in the meantime. But this delay increased the total cost from $675 million to $830 million. Still, InSight successfully landed on Mars on November 26, 2018. But over time, dust built up on its solar panels, making it harder to recharge. The InSight lander runs on solar panels and batteries, but it needs occasional wind gusts, called cleaning events, to clear dust from the panels. Unfortunately, the place where InSight landed didn't get enough of these winds to keep the lander fully powered. By February 2021, during the Martian winter, thick dust had covered the panels, and they were only producing 27% of their full capacity. To save power, NASA started putting InSight into hibernation mode, shutting down instruments gradually to keep its electronics warm. They hoped better weather would allow the lander to recharge and wake up by July 2021. In May 2021, the team found a clever way to restore some power by using the lander's arm to move sand onto the panels, helping the wind clean off some of the dust. But eventually, InSight was only generating 1/10 of the power from the sunlight than it did right upon arrival. In July 2022, NASA put it in low power mode to keep detecting Marsquakes. The lander kept operating until December 2022. On December 20th, NASA announced that InSight had lost contact with Earth on December 15th, and the mission officially ended on December 21st, 2022. A giant is hiding in the sky. Quipu is the biggest thing we've ever found in the nearby universe. It's been messing with our understanding of the universe for years, and we've just discovered it. Quipu is dense, powerful, and dangerous to ignore. If we don't understand structures like this, we might be reading the universe completely wrong. So, what exactly is it? It's not a solid object like a planet or a star, and it's not a single thing. It's a superstructure, basically an entire region of the universe, a tangled mess of matter spanning a huge amount of space stitched together by gravity. Quipu is made up of an enormous web of galaxies, galaxy clusters or giant groups of galaxies, gas and dark matter. It's like a superhighway, with galaxy clusters being the cities, filaments being the roads, and dark matter being the invisible infrastructure holding it all together. This giant stretches across 1.3 billion light-years. That means if you traveled at the speed of light, it would still take you 1,003,000,000 years just to cross it. Quipu also holds 200 quadrillion solar masses, even though it only takes up 13% of the observable universe. The name Quipu comes from the Incan system of knotted cords used to record things, called quipus. It was like a writing system. In that system, each knot, color, and twist told a story, numbers, taxes, harvests, and so on. So, when astronomers saw this colossal structure in space, long, tangled, and branching like space cords, they named it after this language of knots. Plus, the shape of the space reminded scientists of those threads. There's a long central filament, and the smaller ones are branching off the sides. What's even more fascinating, Quipu isn't alone. When scientists mapped this part of the universe, they found 5 of these massive structures. They aren't just sitting there either. They formed over billions of years through gravity slowly pulling matter together. All told, all those giants hold nearly half of all the galaxy clusters in that region, 30% of all the galaxies, and a quarter of all the matter in the observable universe. The team that found Quipu used a clever trick. They searched for X-rays coming from galaxy clusters. These clusters aren't just full of galaxies, they're also filled with superhot gas. That gas is so hot it glows in X-ray light, which we can't see with our eyes, but special telescopes can. If there's a lot of that X-ray glow, it means there's a huge amount of matter, galaxies, gas, and dark matter all pulled together by gravity. That's where the densest, most crowded areas of the universe are. So, by following the X-ray glow, the scientists could draw a map showing where the biggest cosmic structures like Quipu were hiding. Why does any of this matter? Because these megastructures mess with everything. First of all, they warp the cosmic microwave background, the ancient light left over from the Big Bang. It's a faint glow of light that fills the entire universe. After the Big Bang happened and our world was created, it emitted its very first light and signals that still haven't completely weakened yet. The leftover radiation is still coming to us, even after 13.8 billion years. By studying this ancient light, scientists can learn what the early universe looked like, and Quipu ruins it for us. These megastructures hold so much gravity that they bend and distort this ancient light as it passes through them. That's called the integrated Sachs-Wolf effect. These warps add noise to the original signal, and now it's harder for us to get a proper, clearer understanding of what the baby universe looked like and how it expanded. They also mess with the Hubble constant. The universe is constantly expanding, and the Hubble constant tells us how fast it's growing. In other words, how quickly galaxies are moving apart from each other. But giant things in space, like Quipu, have so much gravity that they pull nearby galaxies toward them, messing up the way those galaxies move. This makes it harder for scientists to measure the universe's true speed of expansion. They can't tell if a galaxy is moving because of the universe growing or just because it's being pulled by something huge nearby. And finally, there's gravitational lensing. Light in space travels constantly, but it doesn't always follow a straight line. If the space gets distorted, like by gravity, then the light traveling through the space will get bent and distorted too. Gravitational lensing is when light from faraway galaxies gets bent because it passes by something supermassive, like Quipu here. That huge gravity pulls on the light, like how a heavy ball can bend a sheet. And since light delivers information to us, literally makes us see what things look like, this bending distorts how we see galaxies. The images of galaxies end up looking stretched, brighter, or we can even find an entire galaxy in the wrong place. It's like looking at our universe through a warped magnifying glass. If we're not careful, we could misread those distortions and get the wrong idea about what our world looks like. Luckily, we didn't just drop these mysterious superstructures out of nowhere. Astronomers suspected that something like that should be out there. They just didn't know for sure. Our best model for the universe is called Lambda CDM. It says, universe started with the Big Bang, is still expanding, and is mostly made of mysterious stuff. Dark energy, and cold dark matter, the CDM part. We can't see or touch these things, but we know they exist, because if they didn't, our universe would literally break apart. This model matches what we do see, like galaxies forming, how stars move, and the overall shape of the universe. So even if some puzzle pieces by themselves are still a mystery, they match the actual picture. And this model actually predicted things like Quipu. When scientists ran simulations using that model, they saw similar structures forming, giant cosmic webs of galaxies tied together by gravity. Quipu matched those predictions in real life. This also means that Lambda CDM is matching real life once again, thank heavens. No huge surprises here. But now that we actually found it, it's the largest known structure in the observable universe. There was another giant before Quipu, the Sloan Great Wall. That one was discovered in 2003 and was believed to be one of the largest structures ever found. And it's still an absolute monster. The Sloan Great Wall stretches over 1 billion light-years across. It's called a wall, but it's not like a wall you'd find on Earth. It's also a vast cosmic web, made up of thousands of galaxies and gas connected by dark matter. What makes both Quipu and the Sloan Great Wall so surprising is that they literally seem too big to exist. According to the Lambda CDM model, structures that huge shouldn't be common, especially at the time they formed. How did these giants form so fast in a universe that's supposed to be growing, expanding, and smoothing over time? And if we keep finding more of them, that would be completely insane. It could mean there's something deeper going on in the way our world is built. It's all part of our crazy Copernican journey, a long series of discoveries where we just keep getting humbled by the universe. Every time we find something like this, we realize even more how we're not the center of everything. First, we learned the Earth wasn't the center of the solar system. Then we found that the solar system is just one speck in a galaxy. Now, even galaxy superclusters, which we believe to be the biggest, are being dwarfed by structures like Quipu and the Sloan Great Wall. But also, these structures won't last forever. Quipu is temporary. Over billions of years, gravity will tear it apart, breaking it into smaller pieces. Some parts will collapse into tighter clusters, others will drift apart. Right now, though, it's one of the most important structures in the known universe. It shapes how galaxies form. It bends light, making it super important for us to decipher. It literally messes with our understanding of the cosmos. There you are, trekking across a desert on foot. It's hot, you're terribly thirsty, and now you gotta walk around this stupid wall. Wait, a wall in the middle of a sandy, lifeless nowhere? Exactly, a wall in the northern Saudi desert. Archaeologists have just made a super exciting discovery, and what they found was not just a single wall. No, it was a whole ancient walled city that might date back to 2400 BCE. They think this place was home to around 500 people and could have been used for 1,000 years. This discovery is groundbreaking. It means that the area could have been way more advanced than anyone expected. This city was well organized, with different zones for living, towers and strong walls for protection, and different sections for all kinds of daily life. This ancient city, now called Al-Nata, was basically an oasis town. And it's great since it can give us a peek into what life might have been like in this desert thousands of years ago. Apparently, they had clearly separated areas, like residential sections, a cemetery, farmland, and even a town center. This oasis city, found in the Khaybar area, is the first big organized settlement from the 2nd or 3rd millennium BCE that researchers have uncovered in northwestern Arabia. The first survey showed that this town, which covered about 6 acres, had several districts, including the residential area, the cemetery, and the legal one, with courts. The houses were set up in neat rows, all connected by small roads. Those streets kept the residential area separate from the rest of the town. Back then, most people in this region were nomadic herders, always moving around. But archaeologists have been sure that during the Bronze Age, Northwest Arabia had small walled towns and oasis centers scattered across it. These connected oasis towns were unique, offering secure places for people to live, store goods, and trade. They started showing the beginnings of urban planning, which hints that people of that time were already starting to settle down and organize communities more seriously. The research team estimated that there were about 50 homes in Al-Nata, but that number could go up to 70 as they keep digging. They think that a few hundred people lived there, and probably one of the coolest things is that some houses went up to 3 stories tall. Built on a slope near a couple of major trade routes, this city was set up in a prime spot. Now, one of the most impressive things about this place is its water supply. The oasis had springs and aquifers, which are underground water sources, and such conditions were perfect for farming. Those water sources meant residents could grow their own food, making the town self-sufficient. The outer walls probably helped control who could enter the town and get access to its resources. This settled way of life was an impressive shift from nomadic living to a more agro-pastoral lifestyle, which means a mix of farming and herding animals. Another find that supports this theory is a bunch of tools like grinding stones, mortars, and pestles discovered inside the town. People there must have ground grains and prepared food. They had a diet of cereals, meat, and milk from animals they raised themselves. These astonishing findings show that the inhabitants of the town could easily feed themselves and were surprisingly advanced for that time. Thanks to better access to Saudi Arabia in the past couple of decades, archaeologists now have a much clearer picture of what life there was like thousands of years ago. The most exciting thing is that Al-Nata might have been part of a whole network of similar fortified oasis towns spread across the region, and all of these connected sites could show us how trade routes and small settlements worked together at that time in that arid area. Now, at the same time, this recent discovery isn't the only one that has the scientific world buzzing with excitement. How about we visit Egypt and see for ourselves? After all, archaeologists have just found a stash of ancient Egyptian and Greek treasure underwater. They were exploring the lost city of Thonis-Heracleion off the coast of Egypt, which sank more than 1,000 years ago. This city was legendary, and nobody even knew where it was until it was rediscovered in 2000. Now they're uncovering more and more, and on this dive, they found a pile of gold and silver treasures. Those were probably used in rituals to bless Egyptian pharaohs when they took the throne. The researchers even found an ancient Greek temple dedicated to Aphrodite and some super-old Greek weapons. Frank Gaudio, the lead archaeologist, said it was astonishing that those delicate objects had survived the disaster that brought the city down. Back in its prime, Thonis-Heracleion was one of the biggest port cities in the Mediterranean. It was a huge center of social life and was the main entry point for ships from Greece coming into Egypt. But tragically, due to rising waters, earthquakes, and a catastrophic tidal wave, the soil underneath the city literally turned into mush, and then the entire city sank into the Mediterranean. It was forgotten until Gaudio's team found it in 2000. Since then, they've been uncovering new parts of the city and piecing together its history little by little. If a lost underwater city doesn't seem impressive enough, we can travel to the Amazon. The discovery made there is truly mind-boggling. For centuries, people have talked about lost cities deep in the Amazon, like El Dorado, that mythical city of gold that lured Spanish explorers into the jungle. A lot of them never came back. Then, in the 1900s, a British explorer named Percy Fawcett went searching for what he called the lost city of Z, and he too disappeared. But now, finally, scientists have actually found proof that those lost cities in the Amazon were real all along. A team of scientists use a tech called LiDAR, which basically allows you to see through thick jungle from above by bouncing light beams off the ground. They flew over the jungle in Bolivia in a helicopter about 650 feet up and mapped out those hidden ancient cities. What they found were ruins of a huge urban settlement built by the Casarabi people who lived there from 500 to 1400 CE. And it wasn't just a couple of buildings here and there. No, the LiDAR maps revealed massive urban centers, pyramids, platforms, roads, canals, and causeways, all carefully laid out. Turns out the Amazon wasn't just an untouched jungle. It was once home to big, complex cities. A scientist from the German Archaeological Institute explained that Europeans had long ignored the possibility of ancient Amazonian cities, but the LiDAR maps showed they were wrong. The new maps have revealed 26 sites, including 11 that no one even knew existed. Researchers have discovered two main city sites, Landivar and Kotoka. They had massive moat causeways stretching out like spokes on a wheel, linking the main cities with smaller surrounding settlements. Some of the canals even connected the cities to rivers and a big lake, which allowed water to flow through the area. Over the years, scientists found scattered ruins all over this region, but the thick jungle made it nearly impossible to connect the dots and see if or how they were related. With LiDAR, the whole layout came to life, showing that those sites were part of a much larger organized urban system. It's now also clear that the sites had a greater meaning, since everything is lined up in a way that could be symbolic of the spiritual beliefs of the inhabitants. The Casarabi culture isn't as famous as the Maya, but they had a thriving society in an area that faced huge challenges, like yearly flooding. And although the nearby Andes had their own monumental sites, the Casarabi were doing something absolutely unique. They even had reservoirs to store water, which suggests they might have been dealing with occasional droughts, which is pretty unusual for the Amazon. Actually, those terrible droughts could be why the Casarabi eventually left their cities around 1400 CE.